Hello, everyone. I see some faces I recognize. Mohammed, I can see. How are you, sir? Are you well? Very good. Yeah, welcome and
David.
thanks for joining us. Joining us today, Ultra, and directly for this quick fundraising workshop. My name is David Graham. I'm joining you from a sun-setting evening in the very cold UK at the moment. We've just got through some snow, but let's cheer each other up about how great fundraising is, and let's go from there. I wanted to start with the elephant and a bear. Elephant in question, if this is working, why is it not working? Elephant in the room, obviously, fundraising is hard. We all know it. The elephant in this room, obviously, in this virtual room, and particularly hard in a bear market. Very brutal at the moment, as you all know. Over the last sort of 12 to 16 months, fundraising has been particularly difficult. Funds have struggled with money. The requirements of pre-seed and even seed now is to be looking for profitability, or not profitability, revenues for sure, and a playbook to profitability. So really difficult at the moment, hence why I underlined it 3 times. Fundraising stats aren't really that pretty either. It's taking somewhere between 4 and 6 months to close from start to finish at the moment. That's not getting any faster. Certainly, there are things, global things like, in particular, everyone I think was waiting for the budget in the UK, and so that slowed things down, and obviously the presidential race in the US. So I would say when you're looking at fundraising at the moment, give yourself plenty of time. It's also coming down to a quantum of the people you speak to. We used to be able to get away with speaking to maybe 150, 170 people. That's up to 250 plus now. Work with a couple of clients that we're probably on conversation number 700 at the moment. So it's not as bad. Yeah, it's pretty bad if you're raising something in the hardware space at the moment. I think if you're trying to raise something in consumer that is consumer wearables at the moment, really, really difficult. But yeah, all it is quantum of conversations. And again, a lot of people contact me for introductions to angels in the UK, and it's always disappointing to tell them that if they're not SEIS or EIS registered, they're really going to struggle. So that really sort of puts the market out of reach with a lot of people. I think people look to the UK thinking it is the centre of a startup investment. It is to a degree, but given that 64% are looking at some sort of HMRC perspective on that, that becomes really tricky. 0.5%, only 0.5% of startups will ever get to VC funding. I thought I'd really sort of depress you with that last one. But yeah, now that we know where we are, we can sort of move on. So who am I, and why am I reading your Tuesday with these depressing stats? I'm a 6-time founder, 4 exits. I've now turned angel investor. I started my first business 20 years ago. In fact, 20 years to the date in August 2004. So effectively, I've been raising money now for 20 years. And I've said it on the slide. So what does that sort of insight give me? Certainly, it used to be a lot easier. There is obviously more cash, but more people looking for cash these days. And I think the big change that came from when we first went out with our first funding raising round, I think in 2006 or 2005, I think people are a lot more open. It's a lot more opaque these days with theses. It gets really, really difficult to sort of unpick all of that. And typically what we do these days is when we're looking at theses, we tend to ignore them. and we use a data layer to try and work out what sort of activity looks like. So it's really not that easy, and that's really the sort of big change over the last 20 years. And I have to click through a whole bunch of stuff because I went backwards. Apologies. But don't dishearten. I used to be terrible at fundraising, awful. In fact, I didn't like it. The skill set I didn't really, I didn't really have. But I think as you go through this, in the words of Gary Player, the more I practice, the luckier I get. Certainly, the more you practice at this thing, you get a lot better at it. But you also sort of need to understand the sort of world you're playing in. In terms of what I do today, I run a company called Directly Capital. We try and connect startups with capital in the sort of most accelerated way we possibly can. Obviously, advisory piece in that. We do make some angel investments, but under syndicate with a couple of groups that I head up and source deals for. But what does that mean on a day-to-day basis or a year-to-year basis? I probably look at 2,000 decks a year, much to my wife's disappointment. I spend 160 hours of calls a month with founders. I'm sure she could find better things for me to do. And over the last 20 years, but certainly the last 2 years, we've put together a database of 6,000 investors. And that's sort of what we draw on when we do work for our clients. Let me not make that mistake again. So why is fundraising so difficult? I think really, if I'm honest, I think people really underestimate how hard it is to raise. And I think, most founders, it's one of their skill sets. But it's something that very few people have ever had to do. I mean, it's very much a sales process. Again, a lot of people suck at it. I did when I first started, and it all sort of comes down to practice. I think my biggest problem with it, and this is a tip that you sort of got to get over very, very quickly, is that asking other people for money doesn't always come naturally. And when you're not experienced at something, you're rarely very confident at it. And it's hard to be fully committed to something you're not confident at. And I think this is especially true when founders are raising money, but they're simultaneously running and trying to grow their business. I think there's a famous quote by Daniel Callahan, and I hope I get it right. And he says raising money is hard, ... because it just is. I can tell you as a founder, I just found that a little bit frustrating. And like you, I was inquisitive and I really needed to find out why. So we asked 300 investors. It's one of my things that I always end a call with. Why do founders fail to raise money? So it's probably more than 300 now. It's the annoying question I always ask investors when I'm on the phone to them. And I get really, I really like the answers, the wide array of answers I've got. But when you sort of look at it, there's the same 8 answers, and I've pulled one up already. And the one is that the founders aren't focused on the things that matter. We'll dig into that once in a minute. But I keep clicking on the screen here. Not sure if it's an investable opportunity. It's a solution seeking a problem. I think they're growing too slowly. The ask is way off, and we'll come back to that in a little bit as well. Not aligned with us or our thesis. It was a terrible pitch. I hear that quite a lot. And we have no real sort of relationship. And when you look at those sort of 8 answers, while I hear them in different forms, it's great that we know what those 8 answers are. They never sort of come in any particular order, but what I'm going to try and take us through today is a particular order on how we address some of those. Obviously, we've only got 60 minutes, so I can't sort of dive into all of them. So I think I've just pointed out we're going to help on 1, 6, 7, and try and do a little bit at 8 today, and see how far we get. Where I'm trying to get to today is just doing this for about half an hour, 40 minutes, and I really sort of want to open up, and you guys can ask me any questions that you have. So this first one about not focused on the things that really matter. I always think about being a plucky founder and just juggling countless balls, and you know that you're going to drop some, but the skill is which ones are made of rubber and which ones are made of glass. And again, that sort of comes with skill, and it comes with time. It's a skill that you develop, but in my mind, there's only two that you've got to really never take your eye off. The first one is staying alive. It sounds like a really obvious thing to say, but I think when you actually look at the stats, something like 60% of startups fail because they run out of money. And it is something that investors note, that in terms of what's your runway. In my mind, it's always going to take cash. And in my experience, there is only two types of cash, or two types of funding, and that's cash or deals. In consumer land, deals are obviously paying users. But ideally, you always want deals, and all raising money is you're simply mortgaging future deals or future users for cash now. So the tips on this is raising money is never the goal. Again, I see a lot of founders thinking that that's it. Once they've raised money, it's all good. You'd be surprised how quickly investors can sort of sniff that out and really sort of understand when someone's using this as a lifestyle rather than wanting to actually get to the end. So just be very, very wary of that. I think you need to really convince investors that you understand that mortgaging future deals against the cash that you're raising now. Two is, old adage, always takes twice the time and twice the money. Again, when you're raising money, be realistic. You're not going to do it in 2 weeks. You're not going to do it in a month. You'll be doing amazing if you do it in 3 months. But the longer you give yourself, the better. And it's normally going to take twice the money than you ever thought. And to get to the goals that you're trying to do is always going to take twice the time. But just be a little bit conservative, especially at that early stage. And the last one is, for me, staying alive is about protecting your runway. How long can you extend that out for? What can you do in terms of money now? The advice I would give you, the advice I'd give here is sometimes the tactical revenue is not strategic revenue. And sometimes you might have to do what you don't want to do and get cash in. And all you're trying to do is to protect that runway. I just find, I could probably tell you the founders that ask for funding where I know they're starting to get super desperate. They start taking any kind of deals. And that's really where founders get in trouble with term sheets, is they just start taking anything. And again, the less ethical angels out there will take advantage of that. So I implore you to protect your runway. The other thing that you should obviously stay aware of is staying true to your vision. And I always think that articulating that in a one-liner not only helps you stay on track, but it means that when you're raising money, as I have, you can pretty much do it anytime and anywhere. I have done it in airport lounges. I have done it on planes, standing in the queue for the toilet. I have done it in some very strange places, but I've done it because I've always had a sort of framework that when I've needed to, I could rely on. My framework's slightly different, but I think someone that really sort of encapsulates it is Elon Musk. He once pulled a guy up on stage, and the guy said, "I can't really pitch to you now." And he said, "Well, there's only 6 words you need to know, and those 6 words: know how well we sow that." And through that, you should be able to articulate and resonate with investor. So start by stating the problem, and this sets the foundation of what your business is seeking to address. I also think it sort of knocks out investors that aren't interested in you. So if you say, know how X, and they don't know, you probably know it's probably not an investor for you. While again, you're sort of explaining what you're solving and emphasizing how you're sort of doing it differently. Again, I think super important, just to really define what you're sort of doing differently. And if you can do that in a sentence, you're doing very well. And then you're obviously articulating the impact of the benefit you're bringing to your prospective customers. This sounds a little bit more complicated than it is, so I put together some examples on the next page. Tesla, traditional cars harm the environment, well, we make electric vehicles powered by sustainable energy so that we can accelerate shift to clean transportation. I'm not going to read them all out, but again, armed with some of these, and feel free to screen grab any of these if you think that's helpful. I think if you can articulate it in a one-liner, when you come to do outreach and when you come to your deck, which we'll come to in a second, if you can stay true to this one-liner, you're always in a good position. And I forgot the last one here, which is Slack. But yeah, if you want to grab a screen grab there, feel free. So let's move on to that sort of not aligning with our thesis. I always think of it a bit like dating in the dark. Probably doesn't apply that much today, but back in the day when there used to be nightclubs, one would get dressed up of an evening, put your best clothes on, do your hair, get to a nightclub, and then get very annoyed at the particular person you were looking at wasn't paying you any attention. And I've always thought it's almost a bit like dating or winking in the dark across someone. If they don't know you exist or you don't sort of align with them, it's very, very difficult to attract anyone's attention. So how do we do that from a research perspective, and where do we find them? If I was you and I was looking to research a bunch of investors, I think you can start if you're at a particular stage where you're looking for angels. And remember, another depressing little bit of a stat here is that it's kind of difficult to find angels, especially in the UK, because 60% of them invest under syndicate. So you're never going to know who they are. And if you went to look at me on Crunchbase, you're not going to find me because I've never made a single investment directly into a company. But never fear, there are other places to go. LinkedIn is a wonderful source. Most people who are actively looking to invest will list themselves as an angel or investor. Be very careful when you're looking at, and we'll come to Crunchbase in a minute, but they're sort of tied together. Let's talk about ShipShape. Again, Daniel Svacco has got a great platform there. It sort of scrapes and realizes who's in the ecosystem there, who's making deals. There are a few angels on there, and that would be a great place to start. It's free, and therefore quite useful. Crunchbase, not cheap. I think it's, if I remember rightly, 100 quid a month. And if you're starting a Crunchbase and you see all these great angel investors invested, look, our minimum cutoff point is 8. And there's 2 reasons for that. One, I don't want friend and family angels, because they'll never invest again. You'd have to have a real sort of personal relationship with them. So don't find these people on Crunchbase and then start finding them on LinkedIn and find out, waste your time thinking why they're not invested. But if you can find some that have done 8 deals or more, that probably says to me they're a little bit more sophisticated, and they sort of understand the playing field a little better. If you're looking for VCs, again, ShipShape is probably better for VCs. But then there's a whole bunch of, I've noticed my little ship image. While I can see it on my screen, you're not seeing it on yours. But I'll certainly share some of these URLs after the call. Signal's pretty good as well. That's if you're looking for the respective investment partners in VC firms. I think that's pretty handy if you want to get that. And then you get things like Open VC, and there's a couple more of those around. Again, I mean, before I move on, just a quick overview on whether, when you're looking at these investors, are you investable? We've all heard about, that sort of 10x conundrum, where people are wondering why VCs and angels are looking for 10x businesses when there are pretty good businesses that in 5 years will return 5, 6x. The problem is that all investors are looking to spread their risk. Typically in any sort of portfolio, if you've made 10 investments, you're expecting 5 of them to fail, and you're not just expecting, they probably will fail. You're looking at 2 to 3 that will make a medium-sized return. So we'll do maybe 2, 3 times the money. So essentially, your whole backing is based on something that's going to do, which is only 2 left in your portfolio, that's going to make that sort of 10x return. So when people question you on that, please bear that in mind. I had a slide, and I've got a slide, and you'll see that we do office hours. If anyone ever wants to ask me how that sort of works and how they can make themselves look better for investment, please feel free to call me, or feel free to make a booking on the office hours on the website, and I'll quickly run through it. But it is the first question that you should ask yourself when you're looking for investors: am I actually investable? So what are you looking to find? What are you looking to get out of these? I think the sort of the definites you've got to sort of see, the definites you've got to try and correspond with is stage, sector, and geography. If you don't meet any of those criteria, you might as well just give up. Definitely see if there is an application type and contact details. I know there's a load of free lists that people send around. When you then look at it, it's just a bunch of LinkedIn lists, which is never sort of helpful. So, I would judge any of these things. I mean, I know OpenVC is pretty good. ShipShape aren't great in terms of those actual sort of contact details. OpenVC are pretty good. So I would look at those. And if you can, if you are using something like Crunchbase, let me give you a clue. If someone hasn't invested, certainly in the last 3 to 4 years, there's probably a good reason for that. Either they're not investing anymore. So I would not look to someone who made their last investment in 2013. So you can sort of knock some of those out. Again, if you're trying to find some due diligence on an investor, again, Crunchbase, I think, does a 7-day trial. Get them all together and do your research. If those are the investments they say they've got on the site, I would certainly check against that. And by the way, don't be scared to ask an investor what they've invested in and how it sort of aligns with their title. As I'm sure you're all well aware, there's many charlatans in this industry. A lot of people that pretend that they invest. I don't quite know why, but it is very much a two-way street. So I wouldn't I wouldn't not ask questions about what their investment thesis is, what their sort of criteria is, their sort of investment timeline, whether and a great question is whether actively investing. So
David,
that's a question that can be asked. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, Can I interrupt you for a second? So there is a question in the chat about
Sure.
the source between LinkedIn and Crunchbase in the angels column.
I can't see the questions. Sorry.
Yeah, so there is a question.
Yeah.
What is the platform name under LinkedIn and Crunchbase? It's not.
Oh, it's ShipShape.
Yeah.
ShipShape.vc.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's not presented, but I will. Can I put that in the chat? Let me just put that in the chat.
You can put it in the chat, and then we also will share the deck
Sure.
with the people in the end. Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure.
If I could find it. Hang on 2 seconds. Chat.
Also, to all the participants, don't hesitate to share your LinkedIn accounts, your backgrounds, where you're from in the chat. It will be valuable for networking purposes. Yeah.
Perfect. Tinker shared the URL, so that's great. Anyway, let's move off that. Apologies, that's not showing. Oh, and these sorry, these last 2 points. I thought there was only 3 points. There's actually 5. So this is a slide that I've had to tinker with today because it was on my old computer and not my new one. So yeah, I think we spoke about the nuance criteria. Please look out for that. Some people only invest in females. They'll only invest in particular regions. They'll have some very strict criteria. Sometimes you'll only find that out when you're going through their submission form. But don't waste your time if they're that tight with their criteria. They're normally sort of sticking to that. So I've just lost my screen now. 2 seconds. And then how many are you sort of looking for? Again, I think we spoke about this earlier. 250 is a good sort of starting point, and I would definitely look at it from that perspective. Quickly just run through the scoring framework that we use in-house. We effectively start at 0, and what we're trying to do is keep it above this line as much as possible. So the investor vision aligns with yours, mention your sector in the press, on thesis according to the website as a track record, and we score it that way. We're trying to get to the magic number of 100. We never get anywhere near that. It's normally around 80 is the best that we get. But as we get sort of further up that, we say that's our tight list. As it gets closer to the 0 mark, we say it's a good list. And then we start negatively scoring. So whatever we've had up here, we sort of typically do down here. We start taking points away. Investment geography, data points, all these things you're going through. What you're trying to leave yourself with is a score that sits somewhere over the 0 point. If it starts to fall below that, it then becomes stretch for us, and eventually it becomes ignore. I'm going to do some shameless self-promotion now. Typically, this is what our lists look like. So you can see that fit there, where they're active, verified, sector stage, domain. Yeah, I think we've got 32 data points in there. If anyone wants to save themselves weeks and months of doing this research, by all means, speak to us. We've got a Black Friday offer until Friday midnight. Feel free to hit the QR code or visit the website. I just, it's the reason I started directly. I just found this whole research process really frustrating. And it would seem ridiculous that there are thousands of founders out there that do the same thing over and over. So we've taken a couple of years to do this. It's meant visiting every website. It's learned a lot of lessons on the way. One of them is having to ignore theses and looking to data layers instead. But I think for most people, we can find them that starting 250. Anyway, self-promotion and shameless self-promotion over. Let's move on. So 5 research tips and the traps not to fall into. I'd start super tight and work your way through there. Get organized. You can see that list. I can tell you, if you're having conversations with even 50 out of that 250 list, or trying to follow up with them, etc., etc., if you don't keep a organized list, it's going to be very hard to track. I would stay away from using LinkedIn to your personal network. If you can get them on WhatsApp, and please keep tapping them up. Yeah, everyone knows someone that the everyone knows someone that has exited something, or even from an SEI's perspective, has something on a sort of tax bill that they can do it. So really use that personal network. My view on platforms, I mean, approach them cautiously. The only reason I say this is, if you think of outreach, when you think of researchers as a sales process, if platforms really worked, they would have worked for sales. We should have just said, I sell this, someone visits the other side of the platform, and you should be connected. Sadly, there's just apathy in the market. I'm on every platform, and I can't remember the last time I went on there. So I know these things start really sort of adding up, so just be careful on that. And then the other thing I would say is avoid any introducers that say they're going to introduce you to their network, and you can't get to see that network and who they're actually speaking to. Especially exclusivity. No problem if someone says to you, hey, if I can find you someone, will you do me an introduction fee? Fine. But there are some really shady characters out there looking for equity percentages of companies, whether they raise the money or not. They're looking for finder's fees. So just be very clear and clever on that. And my other word of caution is pay-to-pitch events. Again, the numbers are pretty high. If you can get 20 people there, you can make a pretty good living every month. So I would be very sort of cautious on those. Pitching is art. Are you standing out? If this is addressing that question of pitching, the pitch was really bad. I think it just sort of starts with the structure. Remember, you've got 161 seconds to make an impression. I think 189 if you do. And therefore, my view is that a teaser deck should never be longer than sort of 12 slides, and that excludes the front cover and obviously the sort of contact details. So 14 slides in total. But in my mind, these are the slides you must have. You want to sort of kick off your presentation with the bold purpose. And ideally, you want to use that sort of one-liner that you sort of framed before. Second slide is the problem, and really sort of highlight that sort of impact it's got on your potential customer base. I'm never one to shy away from the incumbent solution that there is. I know a lot of people say they don't have competition and there is no incumbent solution, but I always mention the power of Excel. There are loads of companies that work on Excel, and if all yours is doing is taking away, don't ever sort of underestimate that. So just make sure your problem is really addressing a pain point. The solution is to our slide. Again, is it addressing those problems? I've actually got an example solution slide. We'll go to into a minute. But back to that other a point on the list of investors and why they turn down investment is just make sure that your solution isn't seeking a problem. It really does have to tie it back to your problem page. Market opportunity, that obviously the TAM SOM. But again, can I urge you not to really keep your TAM SOM on point, and especially your SOM. I've seen some people talk about solving a very sort of a nuanced problem, and then framing the entire e-commerce market across the world. If it's not tight and it's not on song, it's pretty pointless putting in there. So that I would say needs to be really sort of looked at. Again, showcase how your product is actually servicing and emphasizing that solution for the customers. And you really got to, in your product, I would say this is where you really want to say how defensible it is. What are you doing different that others aren't, and how long is that product defensible for? And then lastly, that sort of business model. No one's saying that you have to figure out the intricacies of what you're going to charge, but at least outline what your strategy is, whether it's a B2B SaaS model, whereas a freemium model, and give investor an understanding of what that sort of average customer will generate. That, I think, misses off so many business models that I see, because I'll tell you why in a minute. It'll tie back to your ask slide. Market, who you find, what the potential value is, your strategy, your timeline to address those. The most important bit on the market slide is highlighting your focus, I think. What's your immediate addressable market, and are they easy to access? You start talking about spending £2 million on Meta as your go-to-market strategy, you're going to lose people straight away. So is there an addressable audience that you can go to very, very quickly? Competitors, everyone's got competitors, and you've just got to show how you are different to them. Traction, we'll talk about in a bit of depth in a second. But this is where you're saying this is more than an idea, even if you are pre-revenue. And obviously, as you go through the stages, it becomes a little different. Growth, what the sort of go-to-market is, which is slightly different to the market, is, again, it's what the sort of plan trajectory looks like, your team, and why they've got the sort of credentials and the expertise to figure this out. And obviously the ask, again, I almost jump straight from solution to ask, and then I'll work my way backwards then. So while there is a storyteller order here, you'll be surprised how often investors don't follow that layout. I think these are the 3 slides that really matter. I've just sort of made one up here, made a company up. Really high level in terms of what your solution is trying to accomplish. This is not a sales pitch. This is why you think you're going to make a difference to your market with these sort of 3 pieces that are solving the problem that you identified. And can you ideally put some figures to that as quick as possible? If you can't, it just have to be ticks, and you have to sort of talk to those, the sort of Q&A piece that you've got. But when you can, I always think a solution, you need to be telling me why it's different to what people are doing today. So articulate, again, I've got different things over different screens here, excuse me. So articulate who it's for. That one liner, again, is really, really important. And I said, you need to be speaking to the benefits. Again, high level traction. What have you done in revenues? How are you building a community? What does your pipeline look like? How are you growing month on month? Users, signups, growth rates, partnerships, letters of intent, pilot programs that we've got. Anything that you can put down that says, I'm exerting some perspiration here. I am not just relying on telling you a great story about an idea that's going to happen a later date. I know how difficult it is when you're trying to get your first revenues, but you have to put something down on paper that's telling an investor what you're doing. And ideally, this is the bit that when you start having those outreach conversations, you'll be updating investors on all the time, is how your traction is improving. If you know, if you really want to attract someone's attention, tell them you're growing at 10% a month. I tell you what, money will find you. You won't need to find money. If you can start telling that story, it becomes super easy. Again, keep it punchy. Pipeline sales, I always think at pre-revenue is a really good thing to say. At least you've identified it and you've started to have conversations. And then you ask again. It's the one that I see people getting wrong all the time. And it's almost always because it is some sort of arbitrary number that then doesn't get tied back to what you sort of laid out in your model. The first thing I'll go and look at is, I mean, I really struggle with ask slides that don't have milestones. It's basically asking me for money and saying I'm not going to deliver anything at the end of the period. So yeah, my runway. The one thing I am missing here, and I will slap myself on the wrist afterwards, is what the runway on this looks like. So yeah, if this is a pre-seed, you're looking to the 12 to 15 to 18 months. And the milestones need to tie into that. So at the end of the 12 months, you've got 200 paid users. They're paying you $5,000 a year. And is that getting to a number that then unlocks the next round? So, and when I look at that ACV and I go back to your model slide, does that tie up? So yeah, you've given me what an average contract value is on your model slide. Can I tie the two together? That's the one that I'm always looking for. And I think it's surprising how, I mean, if you're going from a pre-seed to a seed or an early seed and your next milestone is your seed, people really try and over-egg their stage. When you actually tie it back, you'd be surprised how few customers you need to onboard. On paper, 200 customers doesn't sound like a lot, but for anyone that's on this call trying to get their first few customers, I can tell you, getting to your first 100 customers is really difficult. You're doing well to get to 200. And then obviously how that sort of ask is going to be used. What are you going to be doing? What are you going to be doing with that sort of money? And again, I'd always want to see that a lot of that money is going to be used to deliver on your milestones. Yes, I know that you've got to eat, but you don't need to tell me about that. And nor do you need to tell me in some sort of percentage of what that use of funds is. I just want to get a sense that what you're aiming to do with that money is going to deliver on the milestones that you've set out. Obviously, other things on there, if you're UK based and you do have SEIS or EIS, please put it down. If you're willing to take a priced round or an ASA round or a safe round in the States, by all means, put that on the paper. Minimum investment, my thought on this is I always took money. Someone came to me with 10 grand, I'll take it. But it does sort of set out your stall. So just to recap, milestones need to tie back to the model, and your use of funds should always help growth. Again, traps not to fall into, keep it high level, leave investors wanting to know more. You don't need to write a business plan. A teaser deck its goal is to get you to book a call. What I don't want to see in a teaser deck is you've asked so many questions, I don't want to have a call with you. So keep it high level, and keep telling the story. Personally, I think it's really important to tell your entire story in taglines. When I look at decks, the first thing I'll do is I'll read the entire story as taglines. If there is an interest there, then you're enticing me to read further on the page. I think taglines are massively important, and really important when I bring up the next word. It'd be point number 4. Keep it visual. Again, I see a lot of decks that are very wordy. If you're going to use words, make them nice and big. Again, they should be short and punchy. It should be enticing investors to read on. Always assume it's being read on a phone, on a landscape. If you can't read it on your phone, no investor's going to look at it. So just be very, very careful that when you're laying these decks out, that it doesn't need to be zoomed in on to read 8-point on your deck. The question I always get: PDF or a link? Link's great for the data. I know how that you're reading it. My thought on this is, I just know so many investors that even today, if they got a link, they just won't open it. And I'm like, why risk it? Why just put down both? Brilliant if you can get the data, but really it's not the hill to die on. So just give them both opportunities. What I like about a lot of the platforms these days is they do actually scale pretty well on phones. So again, there's starting to be a movement to a link. The one thing I would say about links is, if you can at all avoid it, please don't ask someone to put their email in. It's really irritating. And again, you're just impacting the amount of people that are going to look at it. So constant contact. I've got a long spiel about this. Normally, I would speak about that every investor at some point down the line is going to need 7 points of contact before they invest. I've sort of mentioned it later on in my tips and tricks of things not to fall into. I'm not a big fan of trying to become mates with me. I'm not a friend of yours. If I value anything more, it's not investing in your company, it's my time. I have very little of it. If you start sending me a sequence of 7 emails before you actually tell me what you want, I'm going to find that more irritating than I am if you just came out with it and ask. I also think it's a time waste for you. I know a lot of people talk about building relationships. I do think it's important, but there is a balance there between wasting your time and not getting to the point. All you can find out is that you've made a great friend with an investor that liked that you commented on their latest post about AI robotics, to find out that they've got no money, they're not investing, and they're not interested in investing a pre-seed. And then you'll just think, why did I waste all my time to go stalking this investor for nothing to happen to it? My feel on this, real investors are always looking for deal flow. And what I'm trying to give you here today is stuff that really sort of stands out and is going to make them look twice. It's not going to rely on whether you chase them around LinkedIn and commented on them and this and the other. So, I would avoid that. But that's not to say that you're not going to have 7 interactions, but rather have 7 interactions with people that are actually interested in you. Sorry, a long way to make a point. So now we've got a great deck. What we want to do is send a great email. And again, I think this is about respecting someone's time. If when someone sends me in this format, I typically read the deck. When there's no ask at the end of it, and remember, again, it's a bit like, I don't know, a dating, not that I've ever been on a dating website, but I would imagine you have to have a writer profile when you're on there. And not everyone's going to click on or want to have a date with you. But what's really annoying is if someone said, hey, I'm interested in this, please read this presentation deck I've made about myself. People are going to go, I can't be bothered. I just wanted it in a short, sharp layout. So the way I look at this is an opening line. And I think when you've got a very, very tight list, you can acknowledge the investor's interest in that space. You know they've invested in that type of company before. And this is sort of why you've chosen to reach out to them. So it's not hyper personalized, but it also isn't a spray and pray effect. And I would acknowledge that. Your one-liner, again, super powerful, what you do, for whom, and the benefits. It's just the next way to say, oh, I like that. Remember, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get them to read the next line, eventually get to the end and open your deck. So each one of these is leading them to the next sentence. Problem solution in one sentence. You're sort of articulating the problem, how your business address it, as in one sentence. Highlighting that market size very sort of broadly, and why now is the time for change. What tractions you've got to date. Choose 3. Use that power of 3. I wouldn't go massively overboard in terms of telling about every award you ever won. Again, you're trying to keep this to sort of 150, 170 words max. And then state what the ask is and what you're going to do with it. I mean, they're going to find out eventually. What you don't, I mean, if you're saying, I want to raise £9 million on a £24 million valuation of pre-seed, rather the investor knows now than go and waste the time of going straight into your deck and reading that you're way off on valuation. And then make a call to action. It doesn't need to be loose. It's like, if you like my deck, let's have a call. I would say, there is some human thinking that you don't want to make the long call. So I would say 15 minutes is what you want to be asking for. We all know it's going to go out for 15 minutes, but that's what I would do. If we look at it from a, I was imagining if I was writing the Airbnb email, you've got that opening line, you've got that one-liner, you've got what the problem and solution is, you've got the market opportunity, your traction and your model, you're currently raising to do what, and you've asked for them to look at your pitch deck and have a 15-minute call with you. I don't know why it needs to be more complicated than this. There are a lot of people that will say this is not the way to do it. I mean, the role of a founder is to work out who to listen to. If I got this email, I would certainly open the deck. If I read the deck as I've laid it out, I would give you 15 to 30 minutes of my time if I was interested in marketplace startups. I thought this was quite interesting to have a look at, and why that sort of opening line is really, really careful. It's really, really important. On some of these platforms, and again, assume this can be read on your phone, and can you attract someone in that sort of pop-up message? There's that sort of 35 character window, and then there's about a 95 character window. So just be very, very careful on what you're choosing to write. You can see what I did here. I wrote myself an email just to prove that this sort of worked. And in those sort of 95 characters, it certainly made me open and would make me open and possibly have a look. Why I wouldn't hope this email finds you well is because you've already wasted 32 characters on that sort of opening line. So, it's which approach do you take. But I generally think it's quite an interesting thing. Please feel free to take a screenshot of this, because you'll know on what sort of platform what works well. So again, 5 action tips and traps not to fall into. Respect an investor's time. That's why you need to keep it short and sweet. It's 150 characters max, and this is from a person that looks at 250 decks. I mean, just think of that volume. And angel investors particularly are seeing this all the time. Yeah, I would say a normal angel investor is probably getting 100 decks through hook or crook being delivered to them. So be very, very careful there. I've just noticed the tail. I'm so sorry. I'm a bit late. Goal of the email is to open the deck. Again, as I said, the start, not an advocate of relation first, then the ask. Yeah, this doesn't need to be complicated. I would just get on with it and build the relationship from there. When you get a no, please just ask for yeses. If they've invested in, they're going to know a couple more people. So if someone says no to you, please ask them. Please ask them for if they know anyone in the network that may be interested, and then employ the 7 steps from there and keep following up with updates as your traction grows. Use that to find excuses. Ideally, every couple of weeks. If your traction is growing that fast, if it's every month, then go back to that. Investors love to see that sort of growth. And remember, you'll have an email chain that's sitting in an inbox, and they'll see where it's come from and gone to. I thought I'd just end off with this. We don't have time to talk about LinkedIn today, but please don't do this. I did get this once in my LinkedIn. It looks like a long message there. It went on, and it went on. Was I interested? No, I wasn't. Anyway, a little bit of lightheartedness to finish off the call, or to finish off the workshop. I was desperately trying to leave time for questions. If those are the ones to stay on, and if Lena wants to open the questions, I've got 15 minutes I can ask questions on. Please visit the website. You'll find some pre-founded resources. Please upload your deck. We have a WhatsApp group that we share with active investors. As I said, we've got free office hours, and there's 25% of all our Black Friday offers. I know someone said that the QR code didn't work. I've had fun with that all day. But if you use that Black Friday 25 on all our products, you should get the 25% discount. Anyway, that's me. I can't believe how fast an hour goes. So I do like talking. So I hope there were some helpful tips and points in there.
Yeah, totally, David. Thank you. So many interesting insights. And we have some questions in the chat. I wonder if you guys want me to read them, or you can just ask them by yourself.
Oh, there was a question about valuation.
Yeah.
Um,
And also there was a question from Amaya about, yeah.
Let's just quickly take Frederick's question. Is it best to send a one page pitch deck first? I'll be honest with you, when you look at with the information that you're trying to put out there, Frederick, when you try and put it onto one page, you're going to suffer again from that problem. Everyone's happy to sort of swipe through or swipe up these days. Just think of what a size looks like on a phone screen. It would require me to zoom in. So I would just stick to that teaser deck. The quadrant slide one more time. Sure. I'll leave it up there. Oh, stupid. Sorry, my bad. Okay. Valuation from Maeve. When it eventually comes to conversation of valuation, is it advisable to try and negotiate an ASA safe round as well, or is to land on a figure, especially early stage, or is it best to open directly equity round? Great question. So Maeve's asking, are you setting the price on a valuation, and is that why you want to? Is it better to go with an ASA or a safe around to start with? Look, it depends where you are. I think pre-seed, I would always wait for a lead investor to set the price. It's going to give confidence to other investors. And in that case, I would use an ASA or a SAFE to incentivize early closure. So yeah, you'll be desperate for cash. You're, I don't know, raising 300, 400, 500K, whatever the case may be, but you won your first 100 grand in, you can use an ASA to incentivize that. That doesn't go away, even a seed and series A. You're probably talking about rolling rounds. And again, I've effectively used ASAs to incentivize early closures. So, you know, when I didn't know what the valuation was going to be, I particularly never like to set valuations because you turn off more people than you attract. You'd be surprised how many investors won't ask about it until like the third call. It's almost like they want to negotiate it. So I certainly wouldn't set it, and I certainly wouldn't put it in the deck. But I would definitely look. I would definitely look at incentivizing. I would definitely look at incentivizing the round closure with an ASA. What other questions are there? Thanks. Sorry, guys. Gotta go. Let me go to the top here. Good luck to Shake App. They're looking for angels at the moment. Yeah, I can't. Oh, no, I can't see any other questions unless people want to call off mute. I've got another. What time is it? I've got another 8 minutes or so. I can answer any questions that anyone's got.
So there is one new.
Oh, one new.
Yeah.
How important is it to set an exit strategy, especially since there is a different scenario when you are an early stage startup? Yeah, great question. You know, it's typically something you're not going to find very early. It's a question that starts to get asked Series A and beyond, and it gets asked Series A and beyond for a couple of reasons. And it's probably why I used to bail at Series B, because I'm just not into. I was just never into growing businesses beyond that point. It felt like going to work to do the same thing over and over again. But so there's going to be a founder relationship there. I mean, look, if someone asks you at a pre-seed or a seed stage, you know, I think what they're trying to understand is what the whole time is going to be on their investment. So certainly you want to talk about how fast you can get to Series A. You know, I think, you know, in the ideal world, you want to go 300, 300, 200, 200, but not many people can do that. So if you put down a reasonable sort of growth rate by understanding what your stages are, you're going to give a good indication of how long it's going to get you to a particular stage. And it's for them then to work out whether they want to exit, I suppose. Unless, you know, I mean, I say that, you know, in my case, my second startup, we knew from the very start who our buyer was. So, you know, in certain circumstances, and we from ideation to close was 18 months. It was a whirlwind ride, but yeah, we identified that we wanted to be out pretty quick. I don't know if that answers your question, Frederick. Mo, you said you had a question. Did you put your hand up?
Thanks, David. Yeah, that's helpful.
Right. Anyone else?
Yeah, I've just put the question in the chat.
Oh, did you? Sorry. From an angel investor in the UK and with your experience, are some investors investing
No,
in
the previous
EU?
one.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
How often is it polite to follow up in the case the person said they'd take a look and didn't come back? Look, I think the normal. I mean, look, again, it's a sales process, so try and stay away from the obvious. Hey, John, just following up. I always think it's a little bit desperate. But I would say, if someone said they were going to follow up with you, couple of days, send them a message. You might even want to move to, connect on LinkedIn. It gives you an excuse to say, hey, following our, further to our conversation on email. One, you've reminded them that they said they were going to do something, and two, it gives you a great opener to connect with them. And aside from that, in terms of updating your traction, I certainly wouldn't go back every second day. I said, 2 weeks, I think is the most, but it's going to be set by your traction. But yeah, I mean, look, if someone said they're going to do something, I mean, I wouldn't leave it massively long. So 2 days, but use other chance to do that. Frederick, another question from an angel investor in the UK. And with your experience, are some investors investing in EU companies, or they're trying to stick to the UK market? It's such a good question at the moment. Frederick, I think certainly between now and March, you're really going to struggle with angel investors. We waited around for the new budget. That was quite late. We've now got Christmas in the way. There are people that have SEIS and EIS allocation and they need to get rid of. They're going to do that before the end of March. It probably looked like a different picture April onwards. But for right now, like I said before, 64% of angel investors in the UK use SEIS and EIS. I always wonder about that figure. I mean, I wouldn't not ask. If someone asks me, I tell them that, I have too many options in the UK at the moment, and therefore I'm not doing outside the UK investments. But if you've got a compelling story and I'm going to miss the next Airbnb or, the next Slack or whatever the case may be, I'm certainly going to look at everything. So I wouldn't not contact them. Your conversion rate is going to suffer a little bit. Follow up. Yeah, I think that's it. Sorry, we're a little bit over time, Nina.
Yeah, but it was very, lively discussion. I wouldn't be able to interrupt it, actually. Now
good.
I have some questions. May I
Sure.
ask one
Of course.
question? So I actually wondering how much amplification from the partner, like us, for example, matters in case of approaching you, like, for example, referrals and all this stuff. So does it bring some extra points to investors and to you personally?
Yeah, I think what you're trying to ask is, are you trying to ask, in terms of funds, what work do we do for them?
Actually, I wonder in terms of funding, like you in the position of investor, how much added value you get when, for example, it's not founded
Oh, I
or
see what you're saying.
just you, yes, but he finds like, a warmer connection to approach you, kind of.
Again, I'm going to be very controversial, Lena, and say I like people enough that I don't need people to introduce me. I mean, it's nice, but I'll be honest with you, most of the people that introduce me, I'm not big fans of the introducer, and therefore, I'm trying not to tarnish the person that's been introduced. People make a big deal of it. Again, some funds even ask for it. I've often wondered why. I think what they're trying to say is, you know, if you're taking a spray and pray approach, don't just contact us. But if someone's researched me and they're reaching out and they know what I invest in, which I have, by the way, on my LinkedIn page, then I don't really care if it's cold or warm. In fact, sometimes I get really shitty warm introductions, and I know the person, they know what I invested. In fact, even in some of my angel groups, they introduce me from an investment perspective on that basis. So yeah, it doesn't bother me. I know some people prefer it, but you know, again, I'm always in the FOMO camp. I don't really want to miss something. If you send me a good email and I was really interested, I'm going to open it.
Great. So thank you, David. Thank you for all the people who joined us today. We will definitely share with you the deck and the recordings and maybe the summary of this workshop, and also link for the next workshop that we're going to have, because we now set up this community events and we want to make it happen once per month with the topics relevant to early stage founders. So yeah, expect to hear from us soon, and have a great end of the day. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Yeah.